Hello, hello. Greetings of the day, wherever you are. Hope you're doing fine. So, as you're aware, I've recorded close to 3 videos in this week. And to be honest, I'm surprised that I was able to find time to record multiple videos. As I said, the intent is to also increase an awareness of other techniques outside of the core Indic astrology practice. You may call it Vedic, Hindu, or the Indian form of astrology. The second point that I would like to re-emphasize is that we should be open to other forms of chart representation. If you see the first video that I posted earlier this week had a Greek square chart representation, and then the subsequent two videos that I posted actually had the circular chart representation. Needless to say, you will have to familiarize yourself with the glyph, the symbols of the planets, and also the 12 zodiac signs. And of course, more important is to have an open mind and explore techniques, and we learn it together. As I said, nobody is an expert, it's a learning, it's a continuous journey till our last breath. Sometimes we identify certain patterns early on, sometimes it takes time, and it again depends on how observant a particular person is and his karma, and a ton of other unknown factors. But then what is important is the love for research. Keep exploring, keep observing, and increase your awareness, and also be open to try other methods. So, with this super boring introduction, if I may say, let's get on to the next chart. And again, I'm not displaying his name to maintain anonymity. And before I start explaining, you can see the chart on the left is the natal chart of the person. Looks like you saw the name. Chart on the left is the natal chart of the person, and the chart on the right is actually the solar return chart. I spoke a lot about anonymity, and then looks like you were able to see the name. And now that I've mentioned this, you will again make that extra effort to pause and find out who this bloody bugger is. Okay, that's it. Right? So, this is the natal chart, and this is the solar return chart. Now, an important event actually took place in the year 2013. So one was, I would say, slightly positive, but then one was also negative. And even the one that was slightly positive was actually negative initially. The good thing is, after next solar return kicked in, the event was reasonably positive. So after the birthday, obviously to understand the events of the year 2013, you will have to create the nearest solar return chart. So the nearest birthday was on the 18th of October 2012 for this person. And in 2013, but that was almost towards the end of the year, just before his next solar return got activated or kicked in. This was the first time this guy actually went to a foreign country outside of India. Okay. Now, that said, if you look at the solar return chart for the year 2012, so this person had actually completed 31 years, and his 32nd year was the running year. Okay. So in 2012, his 32nd year was the running year. So 32nd, as I said, as I have been teaching, 32 minus 24, the nearest multiple of 12, 8. So you have to look at the 8th sign from the ascendant, which is Aquarius. So 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hence, the sign Virgo got activated. Okay, and the profected ascendant hence moves to 27 degrees of Virgo. Now if you see, this is 1 degree of Libra, so profected ascendant is somewhere here, which is 27 degrees of Virgo. Then this is the Virgo sign, okay, for those who have still not familiarized themselves. So this is the profected ascendant point. Now unfortunately, the profected ascendant falls in the 8th house of the solar return chart, which obviously is not a very positive thing, because typically 8th house is going to be associated with not so good events, even if it is transformation like some astrologers consider, and it is true. It is still not going to be easy. The experience is not going to be a very healthy one. You're going to feel a lot of anxiety and stress and stuff, but maybe the eventual outcome might still end up being positive. So the profected ascendant now falls in the 8th house, right? And now the profected sign is Virgo, because the 8th sign from the ascendant Aquarius is Virgo. Hence, the lord of Virgo happens to be Mercury, and so Mercury is the lord of the year, right? As I said, lord of year. So Mercury is the lord of the year. Okay. So Mercury is the lord of the year. Now you have to pay attention to Mercury, because Mercury becomes one of the important chronocraters. Chronocraters are like, I would say, important planets that you should keep in mind, and you should look at aspects they make or aspects to them and stuff. And that's going to give you a lot of clue on the type of events that can take place in the year. As I said, you should not use this just in isolation. You will have to also use other methods like transits and then confirm events. So this is just an additional confirmatory tool that is going to give you more insight on probability of certain events taking place. Okay. So, okay, coming back to the point. So Mercury happens to be the lord of the year. Now, if you see in the natal chart, Mercury is conjunct Sun in the 8th house. Okay, Mercury is conjunct Sun in the 8th house. So yeah, I mean, does not look very positive, but also look at the fact that Mercury is the 8th lord in the solar return chart. Already the profected ascendant is now has moved to the 8th house, and the 8th lord Mercury, because see, as I said, you need to consider lordships between both the charts, because it's a derivative thing. So the 8th lord Mercury, the 8th lord of the solar return chart, is conjunct Sun. Now Sun is also the natural significator of father. So it's like the 8th lord is conjunct Sun, which means there could be some issue or danger to the father. Okay. Actually, this person's father had to be hospitalized and underwent a hernia operation, right? So 8th lord is also, or 8th house is also concerned with illness, chronic illness, whatever, surgery, many things. So because the 8th lord is conjunct with Sun, obviously, and Sun signifies father, there is something related to father that could have possibly taken place. Okay, so this is the first point. So remember, Mercury, although we are looking at Mercury conjunct Sun in the natal chart, Mercury does have the rulership of the 8th house of the solar return chart. So it is as good as the 8th lord conjunct Sun, and Sun is father. Hence, there is a possibility that there could be some issue with the father or for the father, kind of thing. Right now, I come back to other points. Now look at another thing here. Okay, maybe before I talk about Mercury in the solar return chart, I would like to bring your notice to the concept of distribution through the bounds. Okay, now if you see, now I am talking about the same concept, distribution through the bounds. And if you see, around this time, around the year 2012, and we are talking about May 2012, whereas the solar return is October. So we know that the distributor or the primary ruler bound. So this is actually distribution through the bounds. So the bound ruler is basically Venus, and the partner is basically Mars. So don't bother about the Dexter trine and stuff. So it's like, if you look at a Vimsotri Dasha equivalent, it is more like a Venus Mars or a Mars Venus kind of period going on. Again, there are two schools of thought. One will consider Venus as the primary dasha, and Mars is more like the sub-ruler partner. The distributor has a bigger say. There is also one school of thought thousands of years ago who used to consider Mars as the primary and Venus as the secondary. But let's now keep it simple. Let's assume that the ascendant was directed through the bounds of Venus, and a trine of Mars was falling into that. So basically ascendant was directed to the bounds of Venus in Aries. Okay, so ascendant was directed to the bounds of Venus in the Aries sign. Right? Now if you go further, if I go to the next slide, so ascendant was in the bounds of Venus in Aries, right? So basically ascendant was directed ascendant was between 6 and 11 degrees. So that's the way you should understand it. So the directed ascendant was between 6 degree 11 degrees of Aries. Okay, and I'm coming to a very important point. Now what you see here, this is actually it's available online, it's available everywhere. It's called the Egyptian bounds table. It's available online. You can just click on Egyptian bounds and it will give you this for every sign. So basically every zodiac sign is divided into 5 compartments, and each of these compartments is ruled by a specific planet. You don't have the luminaries, you will only have Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury. So basically Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Saturn. So every time you'll have this kind of thing, right? So every zodiac sign will have these 5 compartments, and each of those will be ruled by one of these 5 planets. So coming back to this part, so you know that ascendant is directed to the bounds of Venus in Aries, and that particular point is basically 6 degrees to 11 degrees of Aries. So let me go to the main chart in the solar eclipse. So if you see 6 degrees to 11 degrees of Aries, you will see that Saturn is 7 degrees of Libra. 7 degrees of Libra, and this is starting, the directed ascendant is 6 degrees of Aries, which is somewhere here, somewhere here. Directed ascendant, I'll say DAC. Directed ascendant is 6 degrees of Aries. So basically Saturn, right? Saturn here from the 8th house, Saturn from the 8th house is opposing the directed ascendant. So Saturn is making an opposition. Again, I'm talking about weak aspects here. Opposition is a very stressful aspect. So the directed ascendant is subjected to an opposition from Saturn. Okay. Now, although you can say Saturn is in the 8th house, that's one way, or if you really see, this is 7 degrees of Libra, whereas the 9th house cusp is 9 degrees. So for all practical purposes, you can consider that Saturn is at the cusp of the 9th house. Okay, cusp of the 9th house. So the 9th house is actually making an opposition with the directed ascendant, right? So obviously the ascendant is facing an opposition from Saturn, and Saturn is in the cusp of the 9th house. So Saturn obviously will have some malefic influence on the 9th house matters, which is foreign travel. As I said, this is the first time that person traveled abroad, and it became a big issue because he did not have the necessary visa. They needed some transit visa and stuff, and due to that he was supposed to actually go to Jamaica, and that was actually from India to Dubai, and then from Dubai to Jamaica. But then due to unavailability of a transit visa, he had to be they did not allow him to board the flight from Dubai. He was made to stay overnight in the lounge, and then with a lot of difficulty, the very next day he was again placed in a flight back to India. So with Saturn at the cusp of the 9th house, and 9th house having to do with foreign travel, and Saturn opposing the directed ascendant, okay, this guy really had a very bad experience. And remember, it's also very close degrees, because 6 degrees to 11 degrees and it is 7 degrees, so it's extremely close to the cusp 6 degrees of the directed ascendant. So when I say 6 degrees, it is here, right? It starts from 6 degrees, right? So that's where the ascendant directed to the bounds of Venus in Aries starts from 6 degrees to 11. So obviously this opposition caused a lot of stress to him, and for all practical purposes, Saturn is at the cusp of the ninth house, considering the 5-degree rule. So if any planet is within the 5-degree of the cusp of a house, then you can pretty much consider Saturn to be in the ninth house as well. So now, if you look at the Indian astrology style, so you have Saturn in the ninth house of father. Okay, Saturn in the ninth house of father, and hence obviously a malefic in the ninth house is going to cause some issues, definitely, right? So, but then the bigger chronocrator here is Mercury. As I said, Lord of the Year, Mercury is the Lord of the Year, and Mercury is also the 8th Lord. So it's like 8th Lord in the ninth house of father. So already you are seeing 8th Lord in the ninth house of father, right? So obviously it's like 8th Lord. If you consider it as trouble is going from 8th house to the ninth house. So the 8th Lord is moving to the ninth house, trouble is moving to the ninth house of father, trouble is moving to the ninth house of foreign travel, and also Saturn is at the cusp of the ninth house. So Saturn is also having an influence on the ninth house of father and of course foreign travel. Right now, obviously, all this, and also right at the beginning, I said the Lord of the Year Mercury is conjunct Sun, and Sun is also significator of father. So 8th Lord is conjunct Sun, which is a significator of father. The 8th Lord Mercury is in the ninth house in the solar return chart. Ninth house again has got to do with father from an Indian astrology standpoint, and Saturn is on the cusp of the ninth house, opposing the directed ascendant, and which means when it's a directed ascendant, it is the individual, and hence Saturn caused a lot of problems with foreign travel for this individual. Right. So look at the beauty on how it is able to showcase things. And one more observation, again, in Indian astrology, we typically don't consider it that way, but it just I just did it as a part of additional research. So in the Hellenistic world, right? So if you see, this is how the ascendant starts. So you have to look at it this way, the circular chart. So if you see the 4th house, okay, talks about father as well. 4th house also talks about parents, and typically it is father, okay, because and the 10th house is mother. That's how the Hellenistic astrology goes. But even if you consider 4th house as parents, which includes your father and mother, right? Now let me go back to the main slide. If you consider the 4th house as parents, okay, father and mother, here is one observation that I would like to bring to your notice, right? So you have, if you see in the solar return chart, right? Okay, in the solar return chart, if you see Venus, right? Venus, and why is Venus important? Venus is also the bound lord. The ascendant is directed to the terms of Venus. So just to explain, ascendant is directed to the bounds of Venus. So Venus is a very important chronocrator. Right? It becomes an extremely important chronocrator. So the ascendant is directed to the bounds of Venus, right? And hence any aspects made by your two Venus is also important. Now if you see, Venus and Jupiter are in square. So this is 5 and this is 2, 5, 8, 11. Remember 1, 4, 7, 10 cardinal signs, fixed signs 2, 5, 8, 11 and movable signs 3, 6, 9, 12. When I say 2, 5, 8, 11, I am saying Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. So Venus in Leo is squaring Jupiter in the 4th house. So obviously Venus is squaring a planet in the 4th house, and this planet obviously has an influence over 4th house matters. So the 4th house, or this planet in the 4th house, is subjected by a square from Jupiter, right? This planet is subjected by a square from Jupiter. So Venus has a square kind of influence on the 4th house, right? Apart from that, if you see, Mercury is at 24 degrees of Libra and Venus is at 23 degrees of Leo. So Venus is also making a sextile aspect, 5, 6, 7. So Venus is also making a sextile aspect with Mercury, right? Right? Are you getting me? And now see this. The fourth house is parents. So the Mercury and Venus are having a sextile aspect in this case. So Mercury is the fourth lord, and Venus in the natal chart is the eighth lord. So fourth lord and eighth lord, there is a sextile aspect between fourth lord and eighth lord. So eighth lord and fourth lord. So parents and eighth lord. So something negative, right? Fourth lord, eighth lord, sextile aspect. So it's not a very, had it been a square or an opposition, then screwed. But because it is a sextile and it is also not very malefic planets, we're not talking about Mars or Saturn, which are like infortunes, it is still okay. Being a sextile, it's not that bad. But still you have the fourth and eighth lord related connections. Here, if you see, the same Venus and Mercury, here, the Mercury is the eighth lord. Mercury is the eighth lord here. Okay, whereas here Venus is the eighth lord. In this chart, in the solar return chart, Mercury sextile Venus. So Mercury is the eighth lord and Venus is the fourth lord. So again you have something related to eighth lord and fourth lord. So there is eighth and fourth lord, and going back to this particular point, you have parents. So that definitely there could be some issue to the parent because there is a fourth lord and eighth lord connection. Of course, it could also be home related issues. I'm not saying no. There could be home related issues as well. But we also saw the initially that Mercury being the lord of the air is conjunct Sun, and Sun is again the Karaka or significator of father. So between the parents and Sun, if you see, even in the solar return chart is in the 8th house. So as a significator, natural significator of father, it is a greater chance that the issue is to the father, and that's where the father of this person underwent an appendix operation. So this is what I wanted to tell you. And obviously, apart from this, you will use your dasha system, Vimshottari dasha, you use Yogini dasha, you use any of the Gemini dashas and Arudas and any other techniques, and of course transits. See, remember around this time, transit Saturn was on natal Sun. So I have observed that whenever transit Saturn is on natal Sun, the father or the father-in-law definitely will have health issues. Take this as a golden rule from me. Right? This is going to happen, bound to happen. Rarely I have seen that it has not caused issues to the father figure of that person. So that was also an additional clue. Or maybe you first look at the transit, maybe you see some danger and then use a solar return chart and all the methods that I told you. Remember, distribution through the bounds, it is available on free software like Morinus. It is available on astroseek.com, I think astroseek.com, it calculates everything. But what I wanted to tell you is how you are able to see the event using these techniques. And I am not using some very techniques that I am building in the air. These techniques have been there forever, and it is just about how to use it. Honestly, I have seen tons and tons of videos from different people, and many of the other colleagues, but I felt that they make it look extremely complicated. I'm not saying what I explained was easy, but then at least I'm trying to tell you how I am seeing the connections. Then you don't really need a Uranus, Neptune, Pluto and other complicated aspects. We are just using the basic geometrical aspects which are part of the original aspect doctrine. Of course, we are not using the Indian style, which I think is simplified and some of it ignored. We're just using conjunctions, trines, sextiles, square, opposition. It's all geometry, guys. So keep reading, have an open mind. Let me know if you like the video. Make sure you understand how the glyphs, the symbols of the zodiac, familiarize. Again, go through my videos, all the 3 videos. The first few were like positive events, marriage. This one was a more of a negative event. Next, maybe I will put up through 3 charts related to childbirth and maybe again related to marriage or maybe job change kind of thing. But if you like it, subscribe to my channel and keep reading, keep expanding your awareness, and I wish you all the best. Stay smart, stay hungry, and have a great weekend ahead, guys. That's all. So with this, I'm signing off. Bye everyone.